Welcome to Chromatic Roses, where a couple of Midwest women cultivate a community at the D&D table. I'm Caitie.
And I'm Soren, and this week we are returning to a series that we kind of started on accident. We thought we could fit the whole history of D&D into one episode, but
turns out you can't.
You cannot. So this is our second part on our history of D&D. But we're going to focus a little bit more on the getting to the modern day.
Right.
But we're going to be starting around the 60s, 70s and making our way to today.
Yep.
As best as we can.
Yep. So we're going to start with some context. And that context is, well, first of all of our information will be coming from two articles. One from Dicebreaker and the other one from Polygon. We'll put those links in the thing.
Thank you,
and
TJ.
then you can look at them yourselves if you want. So that's number one. Disclaimer number two is that we're going to try to go as chronologically as we can. It might not always be super chronological, and
it's a little muddy.
That's okay, because we are not experts in this. So there you go. Okay, so context. In 1969, there were a string of violent crimes that were tied to the Mason family, Charles Manson.
There you go.
Mason.
I was like, Mason. We're rewriting history.
Anyway, Charles Manson. He was an American musician who led a California-based group, and that group was responsible for the murders of 9 people.
Yep.
Between July and August 1969. Also, there were new serial killers coming up all the time.
Or they were reaching like widespread like national news.
Sure.
And it was happening more frequently, it appeared.
The Zodiac Killer, one that we still don't know a lot about.
Right.
There were also like, what were the other ones they named? John Wayne Gacy, son of Sam. And even in the UK, there was the Yorkshire Ripper.
Oh, yeah.
So the Dicebreaker article literally says the 1970s were rife with them. Okay, so they were just everywhere. However, and Dicebreaker pointed this out, and I thought this was interesting because this ties into something that I studied in college called the cultivation theory, which I will send TJ this link also. Cultivation theory was a theory composed originally by G. Gerbner and later expanded upon by Gerbner and Gross, I don't know, in 1976. Living with Television, the Violence Profile, Journal of Communication, 2676. They began research in the mid-1960s, endeavoring to study media effects, specifically whether watching television influences the audience's idea and perception of everyday life, and if so, how. Cultivation theory states that a high frequency of viewers of television are more susceptible to media messages and the belief that they are real and valid. Heavy viewers are exposed to more violence and therefore are affected by the mean world syndrome, a belief that the world is a far worse and dangerous place than it actually is. So all of this to say, the media was reporting on all of these serial killers and the deeds they were doing, and therefore people thought these people were all over the place killing 24/7.
Yeah.
When in reality, that's not quite how it went down. And like you could say the same of just like crime rates in general. People often think crime is more prevalent than it actually is because of how news outlets
how frequently
cover.
It's reported on. And you could say the same thing, like if you wanted to like water it down even further, you could say the same thing of like whatever your TikTok algorithm happens to be on any current day.
Right.
Like if you're constantly seeing the same kind of content, it's really easy to think that's what's happening to everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
So Dicebreaker says it's a misunderstanding that there was an influx of serial killers over the 1960s and 70s. Rather, there was just a rise in coverage of them.
Yeah. So there could have been a bunch in the 1950s or 40s, but they weren't being covered as widely. Similarly,
in 1969, same year as the Manson family killings, the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey was published. Though the book was heavily derived from other sources, it became very important work for the Church of Satan. The Church of Satan was established by LaVey himself in 1966. The existence of an official biblical text tied to Satanism changed things. Also, the book and film of The Exorcist in 1971 and 1973 respectively cannot be understated. So these things were all just like the place in which the world was.
Yes.
In for some context, have we already said we're talking about the Satanic Panic specifically? Did we say that?
I thought we did.
Okay,
I thought
well,
we started
if
off.
we didn't say that,
haven't,
that's what we're talking
we're
about.
talking about Satanic Panic, people.
Right. So now that we have some context, people thought people were being murdered left and right.
Right.
The Church of Satan made a book. And The Exorcist came out.
That movie quite literally scared the crap out of me as a child.
Yes, right.
Nightmares.
So in 1977, The Devils and Demons in the 1977 Monster Manual for D&D included the Demigorgon, who menaced the first season of Stranger Things, and drew on demons that actually were depicted in medieval Christian sources. Demogorgon was even name dropped by Milton in Paradise Lost.
Yeah.
So also some setup as far as like what other people were seeing come out of D&D around that time as well. Also, there was a guy. His name was PEI.
So many guys.
Bonewitz, which, like, what a name. PEI Bonewitz famously managed to major in magic at the University of California.
Oh my gosh.
He wrote a game supplement called Authentic Thaumaturgy in 1978.
Yeah.
That promised to align game magic with psychic powers and magical techniques as they appear to operate in this universe.
Yeah.
Go
ahead, sorry.
No, you're fine. Go.
Sorry, Carolina.
Just gotta protect
the babies.
the garden babies.
The garden children. What I thought was funny about that, I think it's in that same paragraph area where they're talking about this book and how a lot of the D&D community like did not really lean into the Christian piety side of D&D, and we're much more like, if we want to fight, we want to like make monsters and stuff, and like fuck this,
a rules pamphlet from the same year was called The Infernax of Spells, Necromancy, and Black Magic, which includes instructions for the Lucifer Incanus Indicat, defined as a period of study terminated by pledging allegiance to Lucifer. Well, neither of these books were canonical D&D. This is what you were talking about.
Yes.
They illustrate how the community did not entirely embrace Gygax's piety.
Yes. Yeah.
The Infernax even shipped with a somewhat baffling endorsement from the devoutly Christian Dave Arneson. Remember that guy? The guy that got kicked out of D&D?
Right. So, like, there's a little bit of a thought I'm having here about that, is that, like, I mean, it's an example of, maybe I practice a certain religion, but this is a game, and, like, I enjoy it as such. So, like, I can back this, like, demon book you're putting together because it's for a game that we are creating, and it's fun, and I'm still Christian. Right. Like,
yeah.
They can both happen simultaneously.
Right.
Yeah.
And to push that over the edge, in 1979, a 16-year-old named James Dallas Egbert III was discovered to be missing from his dorm at Michigan State University. The private investigator hired by his parents believed that not only was it due to foul play, but it was also due to his history of playing D&D. Egbert was suffering from mental health issues and drug addiction that resulted in him taking refuge in the utility tunnels beneath the school. He ultimately took his own life in 1980, and many still believed that the cause of his untimely death was, in fact, D&D. So from that, this part is not the suicide of a young person, not funny. The reaction of some people, kind of funny, in that author Rona Jaffe wrote a book called Mazes and Monsters, based on what happened to Egbert, which was later turned into a film starring young Mr. Tom Hanks, my boy.
What?
I mean,
Tom Hanks is your boy?
He's just kind of a nice dude.
He is. He is a very good actor, you're right.
And just like the films that I've seen him in, like,
yeah,
10 out of 10,
yeah,
except
job.
for that one, maybe.
I'd be interested to see it.
I've seen clips of it.
You have?
It's rough.
Oh, no.
I mean, it's propaganda, right? It's like,
Sure,
it's just trying to convince teens that D&D is not cool.
Bad. Sure. Yes, he may have had like mental health issues. Yes, he may have had like a drug abuse problem. He also just happened to play D&D.
Yeah.
And that's, you just said, like correlation, not causation.
Right.
I have a feeling that the drug abuse and the mental health issues are probably far more linked to, you know, leading someone down that path.
I would say so, yes.
No matter how unfortunate.
Yeah.
So that's just wild to me
Yeah.
that, and I mean, I would love to say that people have like come a far way and don't act like that anymore and act like those little tiny things that just happen to be in that story. But I feel like people still latch onto that shit all the time.
Well, and I also think about like where we are at with mental health at this point, and then walk that back to 1970, whatever.
Yep.
So like drug addiction, mental health, that was D&D's fault. Like they were finding
that's a good point.
Guilt, like somewhere to place the blame. Not sure about the canonical nature, like the
Books.
chronological nature of these next couple of things. In 1980, there was a memoir titled Michelle Remembers that was published. Co-author Lawrence Pazder was a psychologist purported to be uncovering the repressed memories of his wife, Michelle Smith, via hypnosis. This memoir was pretty much debunked immediately, but thanks to the press, the book became widespread phenomenon, leading Pazder to be seen as an expert on this subject.
Don't you love that?
Right. And then soon afterwards, people became obsessed about this idea that several daycares in the U.S. were a front for satanic rituals that were harming children. Kevin Lanning, who formerly worked for the FBI, said, and this is a quote, "The evidence wasn't there, but the allegations of satanic ritual abuse never really went away. When people get emotionally involved in an issue, common sense and reason go out the window. People believe what they want and need to believe."
I think that is a very, very good statement from him, yes, but I think that can cover a lot of different scenarios. Because when you get emotionally invested in something, you're gonna believe whatever you want to get through it.
Right.
So,
it's like a little bit of a coping mechanism to an extent.
100%.
These claims were never founded on evidence, like he said, and the accusations were sweeping and wild. They included people turning into witches and flying, flushing children down toilets, secret underground tunnels where rituals were carried out. And in fact, many people took things into their own hands and tried digging around the daycare to uncover these tunnels.
I really love, now I'm thinking about it, because the tunnels get mentioned so much. I hadn't even thought of this the first time we were reading over this stuff. But I love how Riverdale included a tunnel system, like in their own universe in the show Riverdale. If you haven't seen it, spoilers, I don't remember what season this is, but there's a whole chunk of the seasons where they are playing their own version of D&D, but they all play them in the sewers, like down like in these giant tunnels.
Wild.
Yeah, it's like there's one part of the tunnel that's completely like sectioned off and like made into like an apartment, and so like everybody like comes there and they all play D&D there. They call it G&G.
Sure.
Gargoyles and goblins?
Gardens?
Oh. I don't remember.
Okay.
I'm sure I'll ask TJ to put it up here somewhere.
Sure.
Here.
There is a second one, death that is referenced in these two articles. Irving Lee Pulling was a high school student who had trouble fitting in at school, eventually took his own life. His mother, Patricia, was convinced that her son's death was caused by Dungeons and Dragons. In pursuit of closure, Patricia tried to sue TSR and her son's principal, who had placed a curse upon his player character that she believed to be real. She put together a campaign called Bad, Bothered About Dungeons and Dragons, which we are in a Buffy the Vampire Slayer watching. You remember Gingerbread? The episode Gingerbread where Joyce, there's a couple kids that die at a playground.
And so
she creates. Do you remember what her organization was called?
No.
Moo. Mothers opposed to the occult.
I forgot that's what it was.
And she
called.
burns Willow, Amy, and Buffy at the stake.
I do remember that part, but I forget that smaller detail. That's
and Buffy's
so
like,
funny.
Moo? Who came up with that? And then you cut to Joyce creating stickers and pins.
Mothers against the occult. Wait, opposed?
Opposed. Mothers opposed to the occult.
Mothers against Mao.
Yeah. So anyway, Bad exists.
That's wild.
Her claims were dismissed by the court. Okay. Amongst other things, Pulling and Bad described D&D as a fantasy role-playing game which uses demonology, witchcraft, murder, satanic-type rituals, and demon summoning. That's definitely what happens. But there were some real-world religious references in D&D.
Yep.
Like the inclusion of gods in the game, just in general. It was even said that if your character died in the game, then the player could be driven to suicide, which was likely born from rumors around the two kids that committed suicide.
Yeah.
Also, the very presence in the game of clerics, who start off as acolytes and can become vicars, bishops, or even patriarchs, who receive help from above, entangled D&D with religion from the start. People started questioning the use of real-world religion in D&D, and Gygax drew the line at including angels.
No. Okay, so we can have demons in our game, because who wouldn't want to smack around those guys? They deserve to get... But angels? That doesn't make sense.
Literally... The quote in Dragon Magazine number 43 from Gygax says, while little objection can be made to the utilization and slaying of demons and devils, who would dare say the same of angels? Surely you can recognize that game use of such is absolutely out of the question for those of the Judeo-Christian faith.
Surely. Okay.
Yeah, so that did entangle D&D a little bit in ways that I don't think Gygax fully anticipated.
No.
Early adopters in the 70s had parallel interests in the occult. This is that new age hippie, astrology, crystals, tarot cards. They just thought the occult was cool, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And to that point, there were still... the rebellious, I'm thinking of Emily and her saying her dad played it, very much the rebellious,
sure.
I'm going to do this to make my parents squirm kind of a thing. Fun fact, I was talking to my dad, hi Michael, about this episode this last week, and he actually had a club get shut down. So he was playing D&D in Midland, Texas, and I forget the name of the church exactly, but it was a Baptist church, who complained to the school board, and the school board shut down the club. Not that they couldn't play, just not on campus. They couldn't play D&D within the school grounds, so they just went to somebody's house and played instead.
Was it high school? Mm-hmm. Church and state? Question mark.
Well, yeah.
Anyway,
so that he was telling me I literally lived through this, and later on he mentioned this to me that his mom ended up joining that church, And he was really mad at her for a long time.
I would be too. Mom,
because...
they shut down my literal just fun game
right.
that I'm playing with my friends.
I told Dad, like, I was like, because he was like, I mean, we still played. And I was like, yeah, but it was still like an affront to this thing that you had a good time doing. Yeah. Like, even if you were able to go home and play it somewhere else, like
someone
the fact
was like,
that
not here.
Right. And blew it up to be something other than it actually was. Just didn't seems like a shitty thing.
It doesn't feel like it's merited. Right. And again, I mean, I think it's going to consistently keep happening. It comes back to people not understanding and people being afraid of what they don't understand. Mm-hmm. And so then a lot of times you get like anger and like violence and like basically shutting stuff down because you don't understand.
And also, as somebody who is not like religious, this also feels like it's my faith and therefore you can't. And it's like, you don't know that all of these kids are even Christian.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's like, not only is this like being scared of something you don't understand, and you are forcing your beliefs upon everyone else, including the fact that Satan is like a real entity that requires caution. Like, it just, and if you believe that and you think that this is a bad hobby that invokes Satan,
then steer clear of it yourself.
Then you shouldn't mess with it.
Yeah.
And if you're worried about your kids doing that, that's on you.
Yeah.
But you shutting it down for everyone based on your beliefs, just like that kind of shit pisses me off so much. I just like, especially for a thing such as this where it's like just a game. Like, it's not, there's nothing more to it. And I know that's part of the problem, is that they didn't understand that is all it was. But it's just like...
Yeah, and I like, as you said that, I started thinking, like, from my experience growing up, there's a heavy narrative in that it's not just a game, and that the devil works in mysterious ways.
Sure.
And that, like... he'll stop at nothing, like to have you, to take you.
Sure.
And so like, and
as not a Christian, let him.
Exactly.
Like I just like that.
And I don't want to make the argument because I don't agree with it, but like the next argument I hear is like, well, I can't do that. Like, it's my job as a Christian to make sure that the devil doesn't get anyone, to take care of those people, to bring them to Jesus.
Sure.
Do you see? I don't agree with that. Yeah. I definitely am all for, practice whatever spirituality helps you feel grounded and the most yourself. That's what I practice in my own life. But like, those were the arguments I got all the time in church growing up.
Yeah. As somebody who's not grown up in any sort of a church ever, it is wild to me, the idea that, like, I take sometimes too much responsibility for other people's emotional well-beings.
Sure, yeah.
But I do not understand the mentality of, it's my job to make sure that you don't get taken by the devil, so I'm gonna control your behaviors and the things you like and don't like, and the things you do and don't do, because I'm some sort of Christian warrior that needs to protect you from an ideology. Is the
exact word.
the ideology that I've ascribed to.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's just like, I've met plenty of people like that.
Yeah, yep.
And I can always see that their intentions generally are well meant.
Yes.
And that's not how the world should
will works.
Yeah, like, I get to make my own choices.
Yeah, yep.
And you don't have to agree with them.
I would
you
agree.
Can even say to me, that's the devil, man. But if I look at you and say,
okay,
sounds good.
Yeah.
Then your job should be to leave me the hell alone. And I just like, it gets me fussy because as somebody who has not grown up in the church, I was fed that a lot by a lot of friends who were like, I just don't understand how you can have morality if you aren't walking with Jesus. And I'm like, I just know that killing people is the wrong thing to do. I don't need Jesus to tell me that. But like, I've just been fed that a lot to the point where when it comes down to stuff like this, it's like, man, let me have one thing. Just one thing that you don't have to mess with and make something out of nothing about. It just, anyway.
I guess I should clarify that for every, that is a very specific type of spiritual and like religious person that I've come into contact with like over the years. There are always like a small handful of them like sprinkled throughout churches, but it would be an overstatement and like not very responsible to say that everyone in the faith is that way.
Sure.
So I'm just clarifying that like I have nothing against Christianity, but in this particular instance, come on, man.
This is also my demons. It's interesting though, not to like get into a topic that we don't necessarily want to get into, but
what is this podcast about?
Right, who knows? But as somebody who is not Christian and never has claimed to be Christian, I agree with the fact that like not all Christians, right?
Yep.
And it's wild how many seem to have found me. And I think maybe that could be true for anybody who claims to not be like tied to a religion. We just seem to attract those type of people, even when we're not like, hi, I don't believe in Jesus. I don't say that out loud, and yet I get this quite a bit. To the point where it's just like, I usually just and let them go and whatever.
Peace be with you.
But it just is, it's wild. It's not everybody, and it seems to be something that I have to
Caitie's a magnet.
I don't need saving, okay? Just for everybody out there, I'm good.
Caitie is okay. She's set.
Anyway. So that kind of wraps up the 70s decade. So we're going to roll with it and then get into the 1980s. We're doing an icebreaker today on our roll with it table. D20. Roll. 4. What is the best perk you have ever enjoyed at a job? The best perk you've ever enjoyed. I've got one.
Go.
I used to work at a pediatric dentist office, and we only worked until noon on Fridays, every Friday. Every Friday we got off at noon.
Wonderful.
The only exception was like, I don't remember if it was once a month or once a quarter, but we would have like a staff meeting, and those staff meetings would happen on Friday afternoons. So we would still like, we'd still get off early, but you would have to drive to the North office and sit through a staff meeting and all that kind of stuff. But there was a time while working there that I was like, if I ever work another job, I don't know that I'm ever going to be able to work Friday afternoons again, just because it just like was so nice. I got so used to just like Friday at
You're
noon
like,
starting.
no, this is my life now.
Yeah. That was probably the best one.
No, I'll just pick one.
Okay.
There are two that I'm thinking of, but in my current job, I work in higher ed, and I can take like college courses through the university that I work for. So I can take like so many credits of courses each year, and it's great because I can just keep learning. I love classes, so it's the other thing is literally just having the kind of insurance that like through my job that like makes my meds not expensive.
Sure. Right. Yeah.
But those two things.
Yep. I can't remember if there was anything at Unanimous. I don't think there was. It just like mostly like a chill work environment. Oh, I think at like 3:00 on Fridays at Unanimous, we could drink alcohol if we wanted to. Like you could have a beer at your desk or something like that at 3:00 on Friday. I never did, but you could.
Could have.
Anyway. Okay. Well, 1980s. Huh?
Rolling in.
Getting back into it.
To the station.
There was an assault on D&D the fundamentalist assault on D&D began in earnest, Jesus, in Heber City, Utah in 1980. A high school D&D club, much like the one in Stranger Things.
Or your dad.
Or my dad. Heber City's club was challenged by a small group of activist parents for the game's irreligious references to biblical events such as walking on water and the resurrection.
When I was reading that, I was like, oh, okay.
The year before that, though, had ruled that whether or not the character actively professes some deity, he or she will have an alignment and serve one or more of the deities of this general alignment indirectly and unbeknownst to the character. So, like, if you were lawful good, right, you would serve a lawful, like, without, even if you weren't a cleric, you would be benefiting the lawful good deity, whether you wanted to or not.
Right.
Fundamentalists read into that passage as sort of a bait and switch. So kids were being told this was all just a game.
Just a game, but
secretly,
if you're
they
lawful
were
evil,
serving sinister forces.
Even the lawful good ones.
Right. Right. So likewise, in Sacramento, Christian Life Ministries began publishing Jeremiads. I didn't even know what that was. On the evils of D&D in response to a planned game at the Cordova Recreation and Park District near Sacramento, California. They scoured D&D books for inklings of heresy. This is a quote, "If it's only a game," one of their screeds read, "why do they use hundreds of traditional Christian terms, and why do they use them in such blatantly blasphemous ways?"
Because sometimes making your own universe is hard. And so also, I think it's an example of write what you know. Like,
sure, yeah.
Maybe they both grew up. I mean, Dave Arneson is very clearly Christian. Gary Gygax
clearly
seems like
Christian.
some kind of... Oh, wait, he was...
Seventh-day Adventist?
Yes, I think so. Or the other one that is don't celebrate birthdays.
Jehovah's Witness?
He was either a Jehovah's Witness or he was a Seventh-day Adventist. Either way, they both come from like religious backgrounds or upbringings.
Right.
So like, why wouldn't they be using that? And if it's based on like medieval times, like that is what populated everyone's noggins then.
Right.
So
that's why. Christian Life Ministries.
That's why.
In September 1985, a Newsweek piece sensationally titled "Kids, the Deadliest Game" opened with the story of a teenage D&D player who took down his Cheryl Ladd posters and replaced them with pictures of demons before dying by suicide. Do you know who Cheryl Ladd is? Because I don't.
I'm gonna guess it's a movie star.
Okay,
but we can.
I'm gonna find out.
Google that. Hold on.
I got it. Cheryl Ladd, American actress and singer. Yep, she seems wholesome. She was in Charlie's Angels.
Okay.
Which also like okay, sure. She was in Charlie's Angels.
Yeah, I'm gonna go from worshiping one idol to worshiping another.
Sure.
Like
also Santa Paws 2.
Her more modern work.
But either way, remember Patricia Pulling?
Yes.
Okay. Well, she and psychiatrist Thomas Radecki would also appear on an episode of 60 Minutes around the same time that spotlighted these critiques of D&D. Radecki would actually relate on camera the account of parents who saw their son summon a Dungeons & Dragons demon into his room before he killed himself. Gygax, squirming on camera himself, would dismiss these allegations as nothing but a witch hunt. supernatural connections drawn tactfully or explicitly by critics exhibited the very confusion they had accused D&D players of since the Egbert incident, inability to distinguish fantasy from reality. The Newsweek piece from earlier quotes Pulling arguing that if kids can believe in a god they can't see, then it's very easy for them to believe in occult deities they can't see.
I mean, that is a fair comment.
Like the ones D&D was brainwashing kids into following.
Right.
It was tantamount to arguing that religion and make-believe are hard to tell apart. She says, shocked. Those kids who thought the occult was nothing more than a cool way to shock their elders would probably agree. So I particularly liked that paragraph because I'm just like, yeah, this is the thing. It's like your religion that I'm not going to say is make-believe. If that's what you adhere to, I believe that it's very real for you.
Yeah, and they would probably, I think that's where the idea of faith comes in.
Right, exactly.
Is this believing in someone, something, and their deeds that you also want to live like.
Right.
Be like.
And that's fair and fine.
Yep.
And then turning that argument, like that you are making against this game, back onto you. Of just like, yeah, it's hard to tell some things apart, isn't it? Like, it's hard to decide what's real and what's not. Mm-hmm. But that's just, that goes to show that, specifically into the argument that I was making earlier about, like, your religion is fine, that doesn't have to be mine.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell make-believe and real apart. Why does your real have to be my real?
Yes.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And to that point, I mean, Dungeons and Dragons is just a game. And if, I mean, you just get into like rough spots with like with the, like the devil works in mysterious ways. It's just, if that's what you choose to believe, then you and yours should stay away from that game. And if that's not what you believe, then cool. It's just a fun game that you can play and it doesn't have to be real.
And I have plenty of friends, hi Caroline, who are still practicing Christians and who are very serious about their faith, and they understand that it's just a game.
Right.
And they have fun with it. Caroline,
to be that serious,
thank
man.
you for listening to the podcast, Caroline. But Caroline tells me about how much she enjoys the podcast, and she talks about like her campaign that she plays with her brother, and like her brother has led games for forever. And I grew up with both of these people. We grew up going to camp together, like church camp, and they're the people who like kind of gave me my first idea of what a game like that might be. Parker, specifically her brother.
Sure.
But yeah, it is a very specific kind of religious person that takes it to the extreme.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about D&D's response to all of this.
What did they say?
At one point, TSR hired a psychologist who defended Dungeons and Dragons to the public, letting people know that the whole point of D&D was that good was meant to triumph over evil.
Yeah.
So that was part of it. But then towards the end of all of this, it forced D&D to like pick a lane basically and decide what they were going to do about it. The idols and the Ifrit on the cover of the flagship Player's Handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide would be replaced by more wholesome images in 1983. Deities and demigods would quietly be renamed Legends and Lore in 1984. The end
Don't worry, it changed back.
Yeah, right. They went, well, okay.
And
we're over that, cool. By the end of the 1980s, the game had totally backpedaled on demonology. The publisher had removed the words devil and demon from all of the D&D books and replaced them with make-believe terms Tanari, and Batizu. Batizu.
Can I see that word?
Sure, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Tanari and Batizu.
That was something that I was surprised by when you had shown me this, was like, oh no, they went ahead and like kind of expunged the record a little bit and like covered some stuff up.
Well, and it's also funny because in a lot of these articles, they talked about how D&D sales actually went up.
Yeah, because it's being sensationalized in the media, right? So like everyone's like, oh, I want to find out. I gotta know more. So is it gonna make me summon a demon?
The fundamentalists in that case kind of did the opposite of what they were trying to do in this sense. But then also eventually it makes sense for D&D at some point to just say like, okay, fine. Yeah. We don't say the word devil now. Better? Is that better for you? And they eventually moved on past it. A couple of things from the 2000s. In 2004, inmates at Hunh Correctional Facility in Wisconsin had their books and character sheets taken from them because officials feared that D&D promoted gang violence. And so basically what happened was religious activists would be replaced by secular critics. It went from the devil's at work to video games make people violent.
I see.
And Jack Thompson is a name who they went after Grand Theft Auto for encouraging violence.
Yeah.
The Wizards of the Coast released its own edition of Dungeons and Dragons in 2000. Demons and Devils, back in it. And deities and demigods returned. Because now nobody cares. Except for the fact that, like, you're doing a hit. You're doing a fake hit. So if you do a fake hit, you'll be hitting people in real life.
Okay.
Fake hits.
I was like, what are you talking about? Now I'm on the same page as you. That took me a minute. But it's a similar argument to like, oh, you're shooting people in that video game.
You'll shoot real life.
False. It's actually like proven. I should actually look up the research, but I've read through some bits of it, is that video games actually help to de-stress people.
What?
Almost like they're for fun.
And now the Demogorgon can proudly pose on the cover of D&D's adventure Out of the Abyss in his full glory.
Good for him.
And Dungeons and Dragons is now used in schools to promote teamwork and social skills.
That is something that I think is so awesome about D&D though, and I think is a great opportunity, is the promoting teamwork. Yeah. And we've talked about it in like a previous episode like collaborating versus reacting.
Right.
And
I will say I teach youths, and if you're one of my youths, hi, I'm about to talk about you. I teach youths, and the youths have told me more than once that like there's a D&D club at their school.
Sure.
It's still the nerd thing to do.
That's, I can imagine.
The cool kids, hi, I'm talking about you. The cool kids can't be seen with the D&D kids. You know what I mean? It's still kind of like a weird thing. And I pride myself on being the like nerd dance teacher because they find me, I think,
peculiar?
Don't tell me if this is wrong. They find me to be cool.
So you're like, I also play D&D. Still cool.
I play video games in D&D, and you still think I'm funny and cool. So
you also could do that and still be cool.
And those other kids, even if you don't want to do that, those other kids could still be cool and do this thing that you think is like kind of weird and nerdy.
Yeah.
So that's just, it's still like kind of on the outskirts. I don't think it's necessarily as mainstream.
Yeah.
But at least nobody's saying they're like summoning demons in the classroom or putting out real life curses that everyone needs to be scared of.
No, that's the cottagecore scene. That's the Green Witch scene.
Right. Yeah, so Satanic Panic is crazy. Just in its totality. And I think what is scary about these kinds of things is that I think we teeter on the edge of this level of crazy all the time.
In society
our
in
current
general?
society.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're just like constantly on the edge of like, fundamentalist like rage. And And it, I think, comes in several forms that we don't need to get into in this particular setting.
Yeah.
But I think that's what makes this kind of thing, A, so crazy, and B, so scary. Is just like, this was a thing that was happening all the time. And imagine all of these indie creators and home games and Critical Role and all of these things just absolutely disappearing because a group of people think that they are bad for some reason. That sucks. That sucks.
I agree.
And that sucks that is, it feels like such a far away thing. This is in the 1970s, 1980s, like whatever. And we are like just so close to it all the time on several different issues across the entire like breadth of society.
Yeah. I would agree.
It makes me a little scared.
I'm trying to think of like a present example, and I'm coming up short.
I mean, all the present examples that I'm thinking of are ones that we probably don't want to talk about on this podcast. Like they're like more societal, like politically polarizing issues.
Okay. Yeah.
But they're politically polarizing issues where oftentimes things like church is tied into it, and we say things like church and state, and it's like
fair.
Protect the children.
Yes.
You know.
Yep. Okay,
It's just the stuff that like
things like I'm gonna say
okay, here we go.
This is not like a hot take, but things like drag shows.
Yes, yeah, right.
Or like drag reading hour and stuff. Like something that is, in the grand scheme of things, not a bad thing. And a person who is performing and enjoying a particular kind of art who also wants to share that diversity with kiddos. And like in a way, like a lot of like drag artists are, you know, they're a cartoonized and like glamified version of some cool character that they've come up with. And like that's role playing kind of at its finest in a way. So like
it's just and it's under the guise of protecting and the Christian warrior mentality, like whole thing. It's that, but it's just blown way out of proportion to affect populations of people who might not even share your belief. And that deal with things like this, where it's like, it's a game where I roll dice and have good time with friends.
And hit the bad guy. That's the thing, as we're wrapping up, that like hits me most is people being so upset and angry about D&D getting involved with demons and whatnot. But the whole purpose is to take them out. Right? The whole purpose is of a for the greater good type mentality. And in my like reflection on that right now, it's like, wouldn't you want to support something like that? But we're getting a little too in the weeds of like, but you're still talking about demons and stuff.
Yeah. And I also like, and I don't know how everything was run back in the day, but like I am currently playing a devil, you know what I'm saying? So like there, if that was present, if there were deities who were lawful evil, and they were present in the game, and you know how your story interacted with those characters. I mean, you get into the like magic, you know, like the same issue that happened with Harry Potter back in the day. Like it's just like it's these supernatural forces and not idolizing them, but like making them cool, you know, making them interesting. And the idea is that you don't want to even be interested in them. You want to stay as far away from them as possible. And it's just like, I don't know, like imagine living a life where you don't get to interact with stuff. You know what I mean? That sounds terrible. And I'm sorry for the people who still exist today, who are so bogged down by rules and scripture that they don't get to experience pieces of life that they might enjoy.
No.
That seems like a sad existence to me. But I am not a warrior for them. So I stay in my lane and do whatever you want. Let's end this thing.
Let's get the higgity heck out of here. We're coming at you live, having a few technical difficulties today, and we are at the end of our capacity in one way. But that's it for us this week. So thanks for spending time with us today. And thanks to Noah, as always, for the use of our theme song. We will have links to his Instagram in the info below. So be sure to go check out him and his band, Pearl Parade, and stay up to date on all of his new music and whatnot.
Yeah, man. If you are enjoying the show, there's a few things that we'd really appreciate if you do. If you could leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts, that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're at, if you could leave us a review and let other people know that you're really enjoying the show.
Please
and
do.
What you like about it. It just helps other people decide that they want to stick around and see what we're up to. Second, you can follow us where you get your podcasts, and subscribe or like it. How, it's different on every platform, but just make sure that you're following us so that you get a notification whenever we drop something new. And then lastly, you can follow us on the social platforms, mainly Facebook and Instagram, that we hang out there and give you live updates. I think I said this a couple episodes ago, but I've been streaming on Twitch sometimes. And when I do that, I usually try to put something on the Chromatic Roses Instagram. So if you find that to be intriguing, you can find that only if you follow us on Instagram. So yeah.
There are a couple other things. We would love to hear from you. So if anything came up in today's episode that made you think, or that sparked a larger question or conversation you'd love to have with us, please either jump down in the comments below, find us on Instagram, those other platforms that Caitie mentioned. We would love to keep the conversation going outside of the screen. And if you do want to email us, we would love that. We'd love
emails.
We love emails. You can email us at chromaroses@gmail.com.
Can't get enough of those little electronic messages.
That's CHROMAROSES@gmail.com. And we can't wait to hear from you.
This has been Chromatic Roses. I'm Caitie.
And I'm Soren. Be nice or else.
Okay, love you. Bye.